we are in here. Let's see more heads. Oh, let me see heads. All right, so we are, it's the top of page 212 for me. There's a little table. So there are 2 stages in photosynthesis. We have stage 1, and it can sometimes be called the light stage, but it can also be called the light dependent stage because it needs light to happen. So they can say, what's the alternative name of the light stage? So you need to know both of the names. So we've already put it in our diagram for our chloroplast. It takes place in the grana. There are no enzymes required for your light stage, but there are 2 pathways that we have to be able to describe. So stage 2 is called the dark stage, or it can be called the light independent stage because it doesn't require light to happen. It can also have a third name. So when we did respiration, we had the Krebs cycle. It's called, the dark stage is called the Calvin cycle. Now we do a real simplified version of this for Leaving Cert. So while light stage takes place in your grana, your dark stage takes place in the stroma, and this part needs enzymes, so it can be influenced by temperature. It will have an effect on your dark stage, and there is only one pathway that we have to know. So I'm going to change my share if that's okay. So you have this little picture of the leaves on your page 212. So there's a physics thing in this, and if memory serves, you didn't do any light in junior cert. So it may be in physics that you have, at Leaving Cert, you have done light. But can anyone tell me why is it that we see these leaves at the bottom as red, these ones in the middle as yellow, and these ones at the top as being really dark green? So when we see colour, what are we actually seeing? What are we observing?
Reflected light.
We're seeing reflected light, okay, and that's really important in terms of plants. So we're seeing the reflected light energy, and it's usually green is reflected. So it must mean all of the other colors, the energy, because light is essentially wavelengths or frequencies of light that we pick up and we see them as color. So it must mean all the other colors are absorbed by the grana, and they're absorbed by these things called pigment clusters. So you just have little molecules that will absorb yellow light, red light, any other color, blue light, any other color rather than the color that we're seeing. So that's the Richard of York gave battle in vain. They're the colours of the pigment clusters that could be present. So if you're seeing green, it must mean that it's red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet are the colours that are being absorbed, the energy that's being absorbed. So if we had a plant that was this colour, what light do you think would be the best one to shine on it to make it grow faster, as opposed to white light? What would be the worst one to shine on it?
Green.
So the green, that would be, that colour would be the worst one to shine on it. So you'd probably shine yellow, you might shine blue or purple, or even red on it, because that's going to make it grow better, because it has those pigment clusters present to do that. So it says on your book, you've got this highlighted portion. So we're going to talk about the light stage, and this is really the introduction kind of to the light stage and what happens. So you have this diagram, but it's unlabeled for you. So a photon is just a physics stroke chemistry word for a certain package of light. It has a certain amount of energy in it. So a photon of light, this is just light from the sun coming in. And what it does is it's hitting all of these pigment clusters, and this line here is energy that's moving. So it's like a little pass the parcel. It hits one pigment cluster and it's being passed along until it's getting to this dark one here, which is called a reaction center. So it's like a place where all of the energy goes to before it now goes into your light stage. So this is representing a high energy electron. So we've had all of those when we did respiration. So it's all about high energy electrons, because we can use them in terms of NADPH, and we can also use them in terms of making ATP for ourselves. So once the energy gets to this reaction center, the high energy electron is going to be picked up by an electron acceptor and taken on a journey. So in terms of the blurb for this that you need to know, light hits the leaf. The chlorophyll is placed near an electron acceptor. The pigment molecules in the chlorophyll absorb as much light energy as they can, and they pass this to this reaction center chlorophyll, which gives that energy to an electron. And once it's done this high energy electron is passed to an electron acceptor, which can send it on one of two pathways. So we've taken the energy from the light, we've funneled it to the reaction center, and here now we've given all of that energy, turning a low energy electron into a high energy electron, and that's now going to be taken around on a little pathway to make us some stuff. So the diagram is just to help you. And as I say, this question kind of relates to the beginning of the light stage. but we haven't really talked about what is the light stage. So the pathways are the light stage. So this is just our intro. Okay, I'm gonna go forward. Anna, you good? Cam? Yeah. Alrighty, so there's two real things that get made in our light stage. So the first thing is we make ATP, and when we talked about ATP in the past, ATP is all about energy, and this energy is going to be used in the dark stage when we get there. And this little animation is showing your adenine, your ribose, and your 3 phosphates, and it's that bond at the end is the unstable one, and when you release that you generate energy, and that we can use it then for metabolism, that reactions in metabolism that require it. We now have NADPH, not NADH, exact same molecule, but it's now the context. So the P is for it's being used in photosynthesis, and NADPH is going to supply electrons and protons, and again it's for the dark stage. So they are very specific pieces of information that go with very specific questions that the SEC are going to ask you. Now I'm going to come out of this, and you have, it's page 213 on me. You are going to turn it into landscape for yourself. You are, I'll show you on a different screen, so I'm going to change screens now. Don't want that. Go away. Okay, so we change screens. I'm going to go here. So this is your landscape page. I am just going to show you, and I'm going to get rid of this in a second. I want you to essentially divide it like this. You are not going to make the division, but we're going to start writing here on your version of the page. So you're given 2/3 to the right, 1/3 to the left, and I'm going to be filling in this 1/3 now. So I'm going to erase. Why don't you give me a big one? So I'm going to be starting my 1/3, except I'm going to be starting it over here. I'm going to color coordinate my pens to match very specific pieces of information. If somebody just wants to go back to respiration for me, we used red for ATP. That's what I have in my head. I have black for NADH. Is that right? And we wrote in blue.
Yeah, black was electrons and protons.
Yeah, and we wrote in blue. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I am going to essentially keep the red in terms of ATP and energy. I'm going to keep the black for the electrons and protons to do with the NADPH. And we're going to add in another color. So I'm going to start in my red because it's about energy. So for our diagram, the light is absorbed by our chlorophyll. We now have electrons, and they become high energy electrons.
Miss, what part is this in? The 1/3 section or
the 1/3? So it's starting where the dividing line would be, because this part here that I'm writing now is common to both pathways. So the pathway that we're doing here on the left is pathway 1. The one on the right hand side will be pathway 2, but this part here that I'm putting down the middle is common to both pathways. So when we start the next day, I will start writing light over here. I will start writing light over here, blah, 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 and our pathway will fill this other side. So
is this piece going in the middle of the page?
So no. So again, we say the page is looking like this. You divide it into 1/3 and 2/3, and this is where I'm writing now at the moment. That makes sense, Rachel?
Yeah.
Okay, and when we start the next day, I will be writing this part again that I'm erasing out now, and we'll be filling in this 2/3 section the next day, because I don't want to kill you with stuff. Now, why aren't you doing this for me?
Miss, what's the word below light?
Is absorbed.
Thank you.
I will try and write better, Emily. I will aspire to write better. I want to get rid of this. So light is absorbed by chlorophyll. Electrons become high energy electrons. And they are going to be picked up by an electron acceptor. So those words are going to be common to both pathways when we do it. So this electron acceptor goes through an electron transport chain. So we did the electron transport chain. That was that whole washing line or washing machine thing, that analogy. So electron transport chain, where you don't have to know the detail of it now, but it's the idea that the electrons come in the top, they lose some energy, and that energy is used to make ATP. So we don't do any of this detail now. We don't have to know it because you've done it in respiration. So what we say is we go up to here, and to describe what happens in the electron transport chain, we just have a kick of an arrow that comes out. So we just put in the word releases energy or loses energy. So these high energy electrons are losing their energy and they are now making ATP, and this is going to be for our dark stage. Okay, and in this scenario, the electrons that popped out here from our chlorophyll, they return back to it. So they're now the low energy electrons, but they're returned back to chlorophyll. So this whole thing is in red because the whole point of pathway 1 is to make the ATP. It's all about releasing energy or getting the energy from the electrons to make ATP for us. So in terms of, and I'll put it in white, so we are going to use blue, black and red are going to be our colors. So you can use whatever other color you want in the middle here. So this is pathway 1 of the light stage. And it has a funky name or a long-winded name, and it kind of helps to tell you what's going on. It is called, it's a cyclic phosphorylation. So the cyclic part means that it goes in a circle, which essentially this is a circle. And the phosphorylation part means you're adding on a phosphate, you're making the ATP. No. Okay, I'm not going to do pathway 2 today. I would prefer that we go a little bit slow and steady on this so that it doesn't wreck your heads. But you now have, one of your jobs is that you have to learn this pathway. So we're going to put it into words. So if you tell me it's okay, I'm going to change my background or change this. So we're just telling a story. Light absorbed by chlorophyll turns electrons into high energy electrons, picked up by an electron acceptor, go through an electron transport chain, lose some energy to make ATP, and they are going to return back. So I'm going to change my screen, if that is okay, and we should have one more left. So in terms of our blurb, you have most of it written already. So for pathway 1, keep it in red. So for pathway 1, the hint that I use for this is it is like a roller coaster. You get on a roller coaster, you're super duper excited, you scream as you go around your roller coaster, you're losing energy. When you come back off, it's back to the same place and you're a little bit more tired than you were. So your hint is, think of a roller coaster, and the blurb that we have is that high energy electrons picked up by an electron acceptor and go through an electron transport chain. Before returning back to chlorophyll. It is a cyclic pathway. And on this pathway, high energy electrons lose energy this energy is used to convert ADP plus P into ATP for the dark stage. Okay, I'm just going to erase my top sentence. Is that okay? So shout if I'm getting too close. Okay, and our last sentence in this is pathway 1 can be described as cyclic phosphorylation, and all that means is the electrons return, that's the cyclic part, and ATP is made. And with your permission, that is where I'm going to end there, because that sometimes can be enough to melt heads. So you have some questions on Teams. I'm going to be correcting your other homeworks this evening. You have some questions on Teams. Give them a go. You need to learn your pathway, because you're going to have to vomit it back up in either words or in diagrams. Again, most common is going to be they're going to ask you for words, and essentially everything in grey is what would be top answer for the SEC. Is there any questions? Do we love photosynthesis more than respiration? Or is it...
Tough decision.
Say it again, Emily.
It's a really tough decision.
Is it a really tough decision? Well, we haven't done it all yet, so there's still time for photosynthesis to win your heart. Once you start seeing the questions, because they're so limited on what they can ask you, it's nice. Photosynthesis is nice if you're willing to put the work into it. So we see each other again Wednesday morning at 9:20. So I'm going to let you go now so you can work on that. Okay, if you have any questions, get in touch in real time. Alrighty?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.